Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, we'll look back to the Hawks' loss last night in Portland. Are the trade rumors affecting John Collins' play on the court? And what to do with the Falcons' money as they have the second most cap space in the NFL. It's all next. Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hittin Hard is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. We ask you to head to YouTube.com, put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your search browser. When you get there, hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment. We are free and available to download on all of your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify. Check us out there and leave us a comment and a 5-star review. And of course, we are available on Roku and Amazon Fire. Yes, you can find us on those platforms as well. And then give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Well, last night was not a good night for the Atlanta Hawks as they lose in Portland to get off on this road streak, this 5-game road streak that we talked about yesterday. 125. They lose last night in Portland, and now they'll head to Phoenix for a game on Wednesday night. Everything started before the game where we got word that Trae Young was going to be out. Now, the other night on Sunday, the only player that was listed on the injury report was Trae Young, and that he was dealing with an ankle injury. And then we got word, late last night before the game that he was officially going to be out. Now, maybe this is a one-game thing. I don't know. When I hear ankle, when you hear ankle or ankle sprain or high ankle sprain or whatever the terminology really is for what he's got going on, I am a little bit leery that this is going to turn into, a few games when all is said and done. And not having Trae on the court at what literally is maybe the swing part of your season. We talked yesterday about how important this stretch is going to be, that you can't afford a 1-4 or an 0-5. And that's what they did last year. They went out, to these non-California teams and they laid an egg, and they went 0-4 out there, Denver, Utah, Phoenix, and all that. You really can't afford that right now at this point of the season. You don't have 100 games left in your year. You've got, now you got 31 games left in your season. So this was such a swing point. So the fact that the Hawks didn't get off to a good start, okay, well, now you got to at least split. Now you know that you've got to at least split these next 4 games, right? You got off to the bad start. So Dame Lillard scored 42 last night. DeJounte Murray was outstanding last night. He was, 50% from the field. He was 5 of 8 from three-point land. He was 9 for 9 from the free throw line, 40 points, 7 assists, 8 rebounds last night. So he did everything that he could do, to help them get a victory, but he didn't get a whole lot of help. He got a nice night from Bogey. Bogey was 4 for 10 from 3, 7 of 16 from the field last night, 23 points. And they had, 4 other guys in double figures. It just wasn't enough, when you've got a guy that scores 40 and you got a guy that scores 23, but everybody else is, 10 to 16 points. It's just not enough, offensively. And obviously their defense, the TrailBlazers shot almost 55% from the field, and they were 47.5% from the 3-point line last night. So again, it's another night where you just don't get enough defensive play, to overcome Trae Young. And it's just frustrating right now because the Hawks continually back themselves into a corner and have to come out fighting and swinging. Nothing is ever easy for this team. And look, even if the Hawks go 1-4, 0-5, is it the end of the world? No. They could still find themselves in a play-in game or whatever like that. But we had so much more expectation for this team. There was so many more things that were expected of the Atlanta Hawks this year. And while, a 1-4, 0-5, scenario out west here may not be the end all be all and it tanks the Hawks season, but I definitely think it will greatly influence what happens at the trade deadline. Because you're talking about 2 days later after the Hawks get back and they'll take on Phoenix when they first get back home at State Farm Arena. You're looking at what the trade deadline is going to be. It's going to happen 2 days later. And you get into a stretch of, once you get through this 5-game road trip, then you come home and you have some good teams. I mean, Phoenix right now is playing for their playoff life, right? So, you expect them to come out guns blazing tomorrow night, and, we'll see what happens there. But Phoenix is playing for its playoff life. You have San Antonio, who's, not been the best, but then you got the Knicks and, the Cavaliers and some of those Eastern Conference teams that are, really in the mix. And everybody's kind of fighting for these playoff spots right now. Everybody's trying to fight for seeding, playoff positioning, things like that. And the Knicks are one of those teams that, excuse me, is fighting hard because they're right there along with the Atlanta Hawks. There's a jumbled mess through that, part of the, toward the middle to bottom part of the Eastern Conference out there. And just nothing is ever easy for this franchise. Nothing ever just comes easy. It'd have been really nice to get a win and get off on a good start, but you don't do it. And now I don't want to say that you have to play desperate, but you got to at least split these next 4, and then you're without your superstar. And he's out. And maybe, we don't know how long he's going to be out, right? Again, when you're dealing with an ankle injury, that could be a night, off, or it could be a week off. Well, the Hawks can't afford for Trae to basically be non-existent on this road trip. It's just frustrating. This past 2 years for this franchise has been frustrating. And look, I can sympathize with Tony Ressler. Like, why would you get into the luxury tax? Why would you start to dip your toe in that water? And I certainly think that, this kind of road trip is going to affect what happens at the trade deadline. While it may not be the end all be all for your season and your season's done and over with, but the positioning of where you're at coming off this road trip is certainly, I think, going to influence the decision makers higher up. And look, say whatever, Landry Fields or Nick Ressler or whatever like that. If Tony Ressler doesn't want to get into spending a bunch of money and he doesn't want to do a bunch of upgrades and things like that, then they're not going to do it. The reality is that if he doesn't want to get in the luxury tax, then they ain't going in the luxury tax. I don't care what Landry Fields wants or, thinks he needs or whatever like that. They're not going to get in the luxury tax if Tony Ressler says, no, we're not getting into all of this. And you're right there at the line at $1.9 million. And I think no matter what, I think that they will miss Bogey Bogdanovic. I think that they will trade him no matter what. It just is too much of a risk to keep him on the squad. And then he's got the player option for $18 million. I really do think that, that they are going to move on from him. And if that's the case, then now what's your bench look like? AJ Griffin and Jalen Johnson, some of these guys can they pick up enough of the scoring slack? So it's a very frustrating time for the Atlanta Hawks and, not off to a good start on this road trip. Dame and the Blazers, they picked up the victory last night, and now we'll figure out if Trae Young is available tomorrow night. I'm sure he's on the injury report. He's probably going to be listed as questionable, and we'll see if he ends up playing, but it's certainly a frustrating start to what is such a pivotal point in the year for the Atlanta Hawks. I want to talk about my friends over at FanDuel. Listen, FanDuel.com is our sports betting partner for Locked On, and they're the #1 sports book in America. And if you're new to FanDuel, we've got a deal for you. So many great features that are easy and fun and make it fun to get involved in sports betting. So when you sign up today at fanduel.com/locked-on, fanduel.com/locked-on, when you sign up today, we're going to get you $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So place your first $5 bet, you get $150 in free bets guaranteed at fanduel.com/LOCKEDON. We've got money line bets, point spreads, player props. Everything's available to you on a safe, easy to use, convenient app. But when you get there, sign up at fanduel.com/locked-on, LOCKEDON. And with your first $5 bet, you're going to get $150 in free bets, win or lose. We certainly hope you win money off of all of this, but win or lose, you're going to get $150 in free bets with that first $5 bet when you sign up at fanduel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook betting partner of the NFL. So we've had this discussion now for 3 years about John Collins potentially being traded. And, I've talked to Steve Koonin. Our afternoon show has Steve Koonin on a regular basis every week, and they've talked to him for years. And I've talked to Steve when I filled in on the show and stuff. And, we've had these discussions about, hey, when your name is always in the news for potentially being traded, and literally, if you Google John Collins, okay, put John Collins into your search browser and click the news button at the top, top heading up there, right? Your search thing, whatever your thingamajiggy and the Google machine and all that stuff. Hit the news button, and literally everything is about Collins being traded. This rumor, this scenario, and it's good fodder for everybody, right? It's all the blue checkmark media that have all this fodder. And look, I was at the Hawks draft party, okay? It was a fait accompli that John Collins was going to get traded on draft night. And then when that didn't happen, well, he'll be moved very quickly afterward. He'll be moved in a very short period of time. Well, that didn't happen, and I wonder if it takes a toll on these players. I mean, I've talked to Steve Koonin about this, that, when guys hear their name about being on the move all the time, there can be some effect on there. I mean, they are human after all, and they're not just a commodity. And the Hawks have drafted John Collins. He's a part of the fabric of this organization. They gave him a big money contract, $125 million contract to keep him here. And then when you immediately hear that he's moving, traded, all this good kind of stuff out there, it does make you wonder if it's had an effect on what he's done on the court this year. So if you look at Collins's numbers, he has his lowest scoring average since his rookie year, 13.5 points per game, which is the lowest since he averaged 10.5 points per game in his rookie year. In fact, it's been a 4-year decline for John Collins. He's had a 4-year decline in his scoring average from when he was in his third year in the league, 21.6 to 17.6 to 16.2, down to 13.5. His rebounds have stayed pretty much the same for the last 3 years, 7.4, 7.8, and this year 7.7. Where he's really struggled is his three-point shooting. And we've talked about this, that he's hooked up way too many threes. Here's the thing, okay? He's shooting 25.9% from three. Last year, he shot 36.4%. The year before that, he shot 39.9%. And the year before that, he shot 40.1%. So he's had a 4-year decline in his three-point shooting, yet his three-point shooting remains consistent as far as number of shots that he's taken. And he doesn't take a lot, but sometimes it's in inopportune times for John Collins to take some of his threes out there. His field goal percentage overall, That's been on a 4-year decline from 58%, 55, 52, down to 51% overall for his field goal percentage. There's just a lot of things that are not trending in the right direction from John Collins. And you wonder about whether or not that this trade, all of the trade and speculations and the deals that are out there, because look, there are plenty of legitimate, reliable NBA sources that have him linked to trades. I mean, Sham Sharania and guys like that, they always have him linked to some type of trade, and that the team is in talks and this, that, and the other. And again, I have fun with the blue checkmark media, but those guys get stories right. I mean, it's not like that they go, oh, for the world. It's just in John Collins' case, they've gone, oh, for the world on all of it. But you wonder about the effect because his play has regressed over the last 4 years. Now, look, adding Trae Young, this year, DeJounte Murray, let's face it, we thought that Collins would be the beneficiary of, okay, Trae and DeJounte, facilitators. They can get the ball to John Collins. They can get him, help his scoring average, and they can certainly feed him the basketball more. And it just hasn't worked itself out. Just hasn't worked itself out. But this has been a 4-year regression from John Collins. And the reality is that when you hear stories about, are teams really interested in trading for John Collins? That teams that are in the market maybe for John Collins would have to get a sweet deal in return. That John Collins, for the money that he makes, they missed their window. And that's probably the bottom line. That if you were going to move on from John Collins, you probably missed your window in all of this. You should have maybe traded him coming off the Eastern Conference Finals and in some type of sign and trade deal, but you've kind of missed your window and your opportunity. So now where he's taken this step backward for 3-4 years, and he's maybe not the same player that he once was. And then obviously, you're getting older, and look, he's not old. He's 25 years old, but still you start to accumulate the years on it. Then you start to get, older, and, you don't have your youth. I mean, look, in basketball terms, youth, but he still should be a primetime player, and he should be maybe not thriving. Maybe that's not the right word, but his play should certainly be better. He just doesn't have the impact on games anymore. And this has been for a few years now, that he just hasn't had the same impact on games. Trae's the best player. DeJounte Murray's the MVP. Where does John Collins fit in all this kind of stuff? Because, again, he's paid like a guy at $25 million per year, and that is a part of it. If you're Tony Ressler and you're sitting back and looking at John Collins and the production and everything like that, you think about those things, right? You think about those things. And then, if you're not producing, and you have that contract on you, you have to be figuring that in John Collins' mind that, if you've heard for 2-3 years, whatever, that I'm going to be traded, I'm going to be moved, I'm going to be, off. And look, GMs can, I don't want to say lie to your face, but they can have those conversations with you about the reality of, are you going to be moved or not be moved? But if the right deal comes along, you move them out, you ship them out. So it's got to be frustrating for John. And this has been a pattern of, for the last few years, that John Collins has just been not as productive on the court. He's not shooting as well. I like John. I think he's a good player. Is he a star? No. Is he, is the value there for the contract that he makes? I don't know. DeAndre Hunter got $23 million a year, and he's a 15-5 guy. Maybe John Collins is turning into that, but certainly John should have been a bigger part of what this offensive philosophy is. And, we talk about DeJounte and Trae not melding well together. maybe John's kind of the odd man out in all of this. It's got to be frustrating to hear every day that he's going to be traded. All right, besides making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day, make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts from. So we now know the Falcons have the second most cap space to spend in the NFL. So the cap for this season is going to be $224.8 million. It's nearly a $20 million increase from last year. So it factored into the high side of where we thought that the money was going to be, or the kind of money that was going to be available to teams. It factored in on the high side, and of course, all the TV money and things like that have accumulated. So when you look at the Falcons, okay, the Bears are number one in available cap space at $92 million. The Falcons come in at number two, $56.6 million. Okay, slightly over that, but $56.6 million. Now, the Falcons can add more cap space when, and it's not a matter of if, when they cut Marcus Mariota. Okay, so they can pick up $10-12 million on the cap just by doing something like that. So what do the Falcons do with all of this money? Okay, well, first thing is you got to get Lindstrom signed. Okay, you got to get Lindstrom signed up, and maybe they do it the Jake Matthews way, that they take the biggest cap hit this particular season. Jake Matthews' contract that he signed, that extension, the cap hit really is big this year, and then it really kind of levels off for the remainder of the deal. So while you have money, you take the cap hit, up front, and, not at once, but you take the biggest part of the cap hit. And so maybe they do that with Lindstrom, okay? But if you sign Caleb McGarry, he's going to cost you some money, okay? And while we're talking about Marcus Mariota, and what you're going to do at backup quarterback, if you do sign a veteran, Marcus Mariota made fish heads and rice this year. He was going to make more money in the second year of his deal. But if you sign a Jacoby Brissett or somebody like that, of that ilk, it's going to cost you a few bucks. So that cap number is going to dwindle very, very quickly. By the time you sign, a Lindstrom, a McGarry, if you're going to sign a Rashaan Evans, he's probably going to get a raise. The natural attrition of some of these guys that you re-sign are probably going to add, or take away from, the available money that you had, where a guy might have played on a cheap 1-year deal, but if you produce like a Rashaan Evans, if you produced, you're probably going to get a bump year over year. So you're gonna start to spend a good bit of money on, when you figure your right tackle, your quarterback, your backup quarterback, or if they start, whatever the quarterback situation is, and then accumulating the pieces that you need for your depth, right? The Michael Pruitts, the Rashaan Evans, whatever it is, Isaiah Oliver, whatever those players are with the names on the back of their jerseys, okay? So it probably leaves you with the ability to, I think, make two splashy free agent signings. I think you can squeeze in two special or high level, high caliber free agent signings. Now, certainly defensive line. Now, when you look at the class of edge players in free agency, it's not the greatest. I mean, there's just not simply a Joey Bosa or a Khalil Mack that's available. But, Javon Hargrave, Daron Payne, there are some excellent and some high-level interior defensive linemen. Now, look, Hargrave is with a Super Bowl organization. Does he want to come? Would he be a guy that would come even if they throw more money at him? But, again, teams always find a way to have money, right? The Eagles will find a way to have money. The Eagles are let's see here. The Eagles are 17th in the NFL as far as cap space goes, but they still will find a way, if you want Javon Hargrave, to sign him to a mega deal. But do those guys want to come play for what's been over the last handful of years a not so good organization. It's not a matter of the Falcons are a bad organization and they're not run very well. They don't have a crazy owner or anything like that. Arthur Blank is one of the most respected owners in the NFL. But let's face it, you've had 5 straight seasons of a losing record, and you've had back-to-back 7-10 seasons. That's not a Super Bowl, right? So can you entice a Daron Payne or somebody of that ilk? Certainly that's the name that's being floated out there. But I think the Falcons have room to find themselves 2 splashy kind of free agent moves. And really, more than anything, I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons come up with some kind of trade scenario. I've seen names like Jalen Ramsey and guys like that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they work themselves into a trade and pick up somebody's contract that another team doesn't want. Maybe somebody's got a non-cap friendly kind of contract and is a really good player. Like, if you're the Rams, you're going to kind of maybe start to reset the franchise a little bit because you don't have draft capital and things like that. So maybe you move on from a Jalen Ramsey and accumulate some draft capital back in return. Well, he's got a big time cap number. I think it's, he's a $20 million a year player. Well, the Falcons can absorb something like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if they work out some kind of deals like that. But when you look at some of the things that this team needs, they need all of the defensive linemen that they can muster, and they need a left guard. I like what Elijah Wilkinson did last year. I appreciate, but they've got to upgrade. They have to build off of what their strength is. Now, will they do that? I don't know. Whether they draft or whether they, spend free agent money and things like that. Again, some of these guys that you think are available aren't really available to get. Like Javon Hargrave is probably not really available. The Eagles will find a way to give him the money that he's looking for, right? And especially playing for, what potentially is going to be the Super Bowl champion when all is said and done. So some of these guys really aren't as available as you think, but maybe a Daron Payne, maybe you make a trade for, a really good player. Maybe, again, you can trade for an interior offensive lineman, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons, with the capital that they have to spend, don't go that kind of route, that they don't make some kind of trade that upgrades them, that they take on a contract that, isn't as cap friendly, but the Falcons can absorb all of that. So it will be fascinating to see what the Falcons do with their available cap space. It's not the $100 million that some people were projecting, but they'll have probably, when all is said and done, probably in the mid 60s to low 70s to spend, because they'll get rid of Mariota and that'll free up some more money. There's rumors about Casey Hayward and whether or not he's going to retire. But if that's the case, you still got to go out and find you a second corner. You got to find defensive line help. You probably have to upgrade at left guard. You've got to sign, your nickel corner. You got to sign some of your linebackers. There's a lot of things that, because of where the Falcons are, yes, they have the available cap space, but you have to fill a lot of holes and a lot of needs on this roster. More than just finding a superstar or two, you've got a lot of holes that, because of guys that were on 1 year contracts, that you're trying to, plug and play with the rest of your roster. All right, well, thank you so much for making Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day. Make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your favorite podcasts from. Also, go to youtube.com, put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your search browser. When you get there, hit that subscribe button. Trying to grow it to 6,000 folks and be a part of our ever-growing community. Leave us a comment as well. We are also free and available to download on all of your favorite podcast platforms. So, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your favorites from, you can download us for free there as well. Roku and Amazon Fire, we are on those platforms as well. You can Download us there, leave us reviews on everything, and then you can give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. We'll be back with you tomorrow. It's been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.